So this is where we start. This is the start of the module, and it really just takes a bit of a snapshot of what we're going to be talking about. So in simple terms, it's the B&D Group Intelligent Safety System. So how our auto reverse and stopping mechanism works throughout the course of the travel of the openers. We're going to be talking about the firmware on the unit, so the changeable, unique information that we force into openers periodically, and then also a piece on the PG3 programmer, which is the diagnostic tool that bookends our whole automation program. So I haven't introduced myself, and I've just spent a little short time in explaining where I sit within the B&D Group. So I represent the B&D Group Training Academy, which is a function of the group to train both staff across Australia and New Zealand, and also now in this new initiative, the dealer training. Okay, so it's relatively new, and I've heading up that division in the automation space, so openers. And then we have a little bit of an understanding of who I am. So don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's just relevant, who's going to facilitate content for you, not knowing who I am. So it's just a bit of a background. This is 26 years now for me in this industry, spending the bulk of the time spread between ATA, meaning the original ownership before the group concern of the automation division. That was a 6-year period in service and sales support. Then I transferred across to Chamberlain, which is Merlin and Griffco. Spent 14 years there, had a little bit of a break and did some commercial service work in shutter maintenance and preventative maintenance programs. And then for the last 6-7 years, back to the B&D Group, where I had roles in sales, service, and now product training. So just gives you a bit of an understanding of who's presenting to you this afternoon. But with anything, we've got to start somewhere, and we start with purely a lens of what the intelligent safety system looks like. And we call it that. It's our name for the safety mechanism, or what's happening behind the scenes on sensitivity. So this is pertaining to all residential openers within the portfolios, and some of the semi-commercial openers. So what does this provide? It provides that auto reverse technology if it obstructs on the way down and it stops and auto reverse is fully open, or what happens when it stops on the open cycle and waits for another impulse. So that's what's happening in the real world, but what we're doing in the background is constantly providing a self-calibrating system that is constantly adapting to suit the age of the door and the fundamental changes in the door over time. So it has the ability to heal itself and at the end of the day provide safe and reliable operation for the door and opener. This is just a landscape of, I suppose, reassurance for you about how far back this technology goes. And as you can see on the screen, started with this technology in 2010-11 and covers not only the current range of products, but back into the previous range of the Dominator and Garador openers, and also the ATA openers. So all of those covered off, and it just means that we're just continually improving on this intelligent safety system as we go through our history. So we start, because the middle part of the pack is pertaining to a little bit of technical about how the intelligent safety system works. It's very required to discuss key glossary terms that we're going to be talking about. And the first one we're going to be talking about is this load word. And load is just purely the strain applied to the opener, wherever that strain is being applied to the open and close of the garage door. So load is measured in amps in our system, and is monitored and adjusted automatically, but can also be lens viewed, so looked at and adapted with the use of the PG3 programmer, because we do know that things change. So the load is going to be changed due to the size of the door mass, the environmental, meaning wind conditions, door spring tension loss, poorly installed and non-service doors, incorrect limit positioning, so that's the over-driven close limit position or the slamming action into the power head with a forceful action on the open cycle, and the impact and auto reverse that will actually create current back to the opener as well by the sheer fact of the auto reverse taking place. All this can be viewed very clearly in what we call a load monitoring piece in the PG3 programmer, and we'll be talking about that in the latter part of the pack. Second one is force margin, and it's got a direct correlation to load in our system, so we need to understand what it does and what it is. And this is the invisible line. So we're talking about a sensitivity line in the old talk. So force margin is sensitivity line. And what that is the workable line, the line above the workable load. So we have a point at which it's going to auto reverse. That can be changed by the installer by the sheer fact of changing the default line. So whether it's an amp or whether it's incrementally up to 2 amps, that means it's going to be either very responsive and auto reverse more prevalently, or be more reluctant to auto reverse or stop if it's been impacted on. So that's just a call out of remembering it's dealing with the auto reverse and the stopping mechanism on impact for the garage door opener. And the last one that we really need to focus on is the reprofiling. So reprofiling in our system is a single button press, a small procedure that would clear the history of the opener settings in terms of what it's seen and what it's needing through the course of the open and close actions. So where the force is being tracked in comparison to the force margin. So what we can do is reset, and this reprofiling resets and then does an automatic 4 to 6 cycles depending on what it needs to understand, and starts that that profiling system all again, and it ties into adjusting things after the fact. So I'll give you an example here. If you, or the service technicians or the installers of the world on the line, if you make last minute adjustments to the door, i.e. tension or just any sort of adjustment, that may change the characteristics of that setting that you had in the opener. So the reprofiling button press is just going to take into account these new changes that you've just made at the last minute. So very important piece of the puzzle that was indicated in an EDM just recently through the New Zealand marketing team, to just call it out for if you're experiencing some troubles, use the reprofiling button and it'll clear and start this calibration again. But we do talk about getting a bit technical. This is about as deep as we go thus far. But what we're having here is I'm going to present a series of graphing systems or graphs that have been created by plugging in a computer to the PG3 programmer and then through to the opener to see live, as best you can live in graphs, of what's actually happening when you press the remote control and cycle the door between open and close. So it's very important we understand at least a little bit about this, because it's a unique system in worldwide garage door control. We completely profile the cycle. So what I'm going to talk about is the lines. The lines is what you see in this graph here. And it's just purely a division of purple being the force margin, the line above the load. So this is the force margin, the purple or the blue, sorry, the blue line. And then we have the green line. So the green line's quite unclean. You'll see it just jumping all over the place because we know load does change, right? It's not perfect. So then we have a purple line, and that's smoothing out the load. It's actually making it a digital signal. so we can understand it a lot more clearer. So that's defining load a lot more. And then we've got this highlight at the top here, which is the kilogram of load that we're under. So we've just introduced a load, for an example, which is 10 kilos. So at this point, everything's true. If you look at the way it's tracking, it's following the load very specifically, jumping up, jumping down, so that 1.2 margin is tracking almost identically above the load line. When we get to a point of simulating loss of tension of door, we need to add kilograms. So we're going to do that now. So the next one is simulating, oh, we've just lost tension. Not complete tension, because it needs to be gradual over time. And our system has the ability to heal. And I'm going to explain the healing process. But first one is, I've just jumped up to 15 kilos. You'll see that the force margin lines jumped up high. That's a compensation to get the door running, because it does not know what the evidence of this load is. So it jumps up to compensate. You'll see that the load's jumped up as well, but it's not clean. The load is very close to the force margin, and then it's sometimes getting further away, but it's not tracking the way we need it to. So we're going to introduce something behind the scenes now that's always happening, and that's 6 cycles are required. So if the door just gets 6 cycles uninterrupted, it's going to take that load and adjust and understand it and accept that it's part of the system and put it away as normal operation. This is the beauty of the B&D Group safety system or sensitivity, that it's compensating or healing over time. So we've just said that's the way it works, and this is actually how it is working. So from 1 to 2 to 3, you'll see it's starting to get understanding of what's going on. It's still jumping quite a bit. We're trying to understand it in 3. In 4, we're really starting to understand it, and the gaps between force margin and load are definitely starting to align. In 5, it's nearly there. And in 6, we've actually absorbed it into the main body of the system as normal running load. So that 5 kilos is accepted. We could start the ball rolling again and add another 5 kilos. This one is just saying everything's going to start again, and we're simulating loss of tension. So this is the healing system that we have. It's going to accept it so long as we have 6 cycles uninterrupted. It's going to deal with tension loss over time. So what if we are a little bit of a technical team on the line, you'd understand by this knowledge, you're understanding that you don't need to over-tension doors. The doors, in theory, should be just sitting nicely on the ground, rather than that philosophy that we've always used is we need to over-tension from brand new, because the springs will relax over time. But we're saying our system knows that and will adapt. So very important piece of the puzzle in our intelligent safety system. Going to talk now about force margin again in the next gen product and some changes. So we have changed the platform, so all the button controls are different across the whole next gen sectional range. We're just covering off what it's compatible to, how to adjust this area now, but the main call out is the default force margin as in current out of the box. You'll see in the top line here, that was in the manual, 0.7 of an amp out of the box, 0.9 incremental change by the installer, same again in 3 to 1.2, 1.5 and up to 2 amps. Now with new information provided by yourselves as dealers across the marketplace, we've changed that to become 1 amp as standard. So 1 amp out of the box has got more scope above that workable load line. Then we talk about the gaps. So the adjustments in 2 has gone up to 1.2 now. 3's gone up to 1.4. 4 has gone up to 1.6, and we're still maximum available current is 2 amps on that force margin adjustment. Oop. But next one, once again, recap again, we've got the reprofiling step, and I put it on the screen because it is important, and it's as simple as press mode button repetitively until the gear light is lit, and then press and hold the close button for 2 seconds and let go, and the opener will start to auto cycle by itself up to between 4 and 6 cycles to correctly reset what it's seeing. Okay, so that's a get out of jail function to reset everything and clear out what the history was, because the history can be misunderstood sometimes by what's been happening at the door. So I'm going to use this as a break point because we've covered a lot of content in a short amount of time. I'd encourage you to take yourselves off mute.
Okay, see ya.
I'd encourage you to take yourself off mute, and if there's any questions that arise, I'm more than happy to knock them down now for a short amount of time before we finish off the pack in the last 15 minutes. Nothing there?
I've got no questions on the chat either, Andrew.
Nothing on the chat? Okay. Well, that just means that we're going to have more of a chance to chat amongst ourselves right at the end, because I think that's when we stop looking at a screen and then we can just talk amongst ourselves. So it's probably a good thing. So this has started a bit of an understanding of what we're doing behind the scenes, but it all ties into one thing, and that one thing is firmware. Okay, so this is the reality screen for us all. And I just talk literally about what we've done over the next 2 slides, but the firmware is unique to us. Nowhere in the world do any other garage door or gate company provide an ability to control their own destiny by putting firmware in and also giving that opportunity for the service and installers to make products better by forcing firmware into a unit. Okay, what's called internationally as a mask chip. So if you have a XYZ manufacturer, if they choose to do a change, they'll provide you with a new circuit board or a new unit. They will not allow you to play around with the firmware. So we provide updates that's going to provide 3 things. Well, it's actually many more, but 3 super categories. So we're providing performance upgrades to the way in which the product works. We're doing running fixes. So that's the reality. We're fixing things that we've picked up and also bugs, things that have appeared in our firmware that we haven't introduced, but it's just the 0s and 1s. We needed to iron them out. And then the enabling new technology is turning things on. So this is as simple as 2 areas, I suppose, to make it live to you. If we have a circuit board that does not have auto lock compliance, in one of the earlier firmware versions, we could have just turned that on. And same with 55, we can go back to a unit, and if the pins are there, you know, the port is there, we can actually turn that auto lock function on to allow for the pins to start powering up these auto locks. And the same goes for smartphone control. The earlier ones did not have it, but if the port is there, we can turn a smartphone control on through the use of the programmer. So there's a number of other things we will do, but on this, and it's a very big reality check for us all, that we have, through some robust feedback across New Zealand and Australia, we have found that the firmware was insufficient to run effectively every type of door in the marketplace. So there's been some unnecessary callbacks across North and South Island, and we're talking about force margin and obstruction issues. This ties in directly to the EDM or the marketing communication that you may have just seen last week, which says we've identified something, we've fixed it, this is the fix, firmware 55, and we're asking that this we work through as a group, so our business colleagues and our business partners across New Zealand, to affect change, positive change, because we've listened to what you've been talking about and acted on it pretty much immediately. So we've done some field trials across Australia and New Zealand, and those field trials have been successful, and now we're forcing through new firmware. So this is a new world order for the B&D Group. We are being very transparent to our dealers, especially across Australia and New Zealand, because we believe it's important now to show our full hand. And our full hand is on the screen now. This is what we've changed. There's a lot of words here, but you can get a copy of it and we'll actually work through it and explain it to you. Paul McKenzie, through the marketing team, has put the items in red as super category changes, things that we've done to directly impact the obstruction and force settings of the opener. Okay, so these are the things that you've been talking about to your BDMs and the wider business. So we've got margin settings. So we've got new defaults with all settings now accessible through the control panel. So that's what I've just talked about in that force margin page, that we've got that 1 amp as default, and those incremental changes in they're stepping up and stepping down up to 2 amps. That's one. We've got closed cycle changes. That's the big change for us, and you'll see that that's going to smooth out a lot. The cycle between fully open to going closed has now sped up, and that's got a direct impact to the responsiveness of sensitivity. So that's a big change. We've also made some door profiling improvements, so it's going to be more consistent across that 100% of the door travel, because we're knowing a bit more about what we're seeing in the doors across Australia and New Zealand. And then the door closing and obstruction improvements. The response time has changed between impact and auto reverse. So in timeline, so when it gets up to the critical area, at how quickly it will respond. So that covers the 1, 2, 3, 4 major points that we've changed, but we've also identified some DC motor noise coming through production. It's a small amount, but what it's creating is electrical noise in through the circuitry, and that clouds the judgment of load readings and force margin readings. So to identify that, we put through what's called filtering. So that's not seen, that motor noise is not seen, and therefore we get a cleaner signal. Then on the right-hand side, that's the further stuff. So outside of what we've addressed in the force margin obstruction area, this is more housekeeping and things that we've always needed to do in this timeline. So our last firmware upgrade was done internally in November last year, and we've picked up a number of things that needed improvement, and we're constantly defining this, but that's available to you. I'm not going to talk through these because there's too many, but you'll see, as I said, we're being very transparent here. There's a bug fix there. All right, so whatever that bug fix was, I don't know. Prevent, this is one in development, prevent transmitter trigger received while in settings menu from being responded to when menu exited. Don't know. I've never seen that. You probably never seen that, but they've identified it. So this is when I say the New World Order, this is the way we're going to roll with all dealers now. So any communication is going to deck out exactly what we're doing with firmware. Positive change. But it ties directly in. Once again, firmware ties directly in with the programmer. The programmer is unique to our business. There's nothing like this in the world of garage door or gate. As I said, to get into the space of a product that diagnoses and manages down to micro level, 98% of the functions that are available within our product is quite unique, to the point where this product was one of the 3 items that cracked the US market for us. So PG3, auto lock, and smartphone control were the 3 things that the North American market said, we can't believe you're doing this stuff. It's just not available. To be able to give the management of the product to the installers and service techs is key to success. So this is a compatibility page. So we talk about, first of all, the points that mean important things for you. What it does is develop a preventative maintenance program with all businesses, because we can actually manage the expectations of customers now through the life of the opener and the door. We can diagnose things, but the end bullet point I try to push home here is that it's a money saver and a money maker for the dealers if used correctly. Across the board, we have compatibility against the garage door openers in all of our brands, residential and some commercial products, and that's pertaining to GDO 10 and GDO 12. Then we have commercial access products, the Access Pro shutter motors, all compatible, both ranges of swing and sliding gate motors, and receivers for transmitter management. So this is all going to come to light, and I'm only focusing now on the big super features of this product. The first one that we've just talked about is updating the firmware. It's very important we understand this, because it's the main area that you're going to be working through to update firmware. So you'll see a screenshot here of the actual programmer. It gives you the base DNA of the product as soon as you plug it in. So in this case, it's an SDO7, that's a smart, and version number 1.13. You'll see the cursor, it's pointing to a asterisk, and it says firmware upgrade. That's saying that the programmer has looked at the board, and the board has looked at the programmer and said, the program is better than me, force in new firmware. But if it does not say it on the screen, you cannot force new firmware into it. So if it says no firmware, or it does not say this firmware upgrade, it means it's looked at each other and said, we're all good, and you can't force new firmware in. So that's the first point here. You cannot force firmware into a unit. It either wants it or it doesn't want it. The upgrade is very important. We know the key facts that we're going to wipe everything. Instantaneously, when we go through an upgrade, we are going to make that product not even a garage door opener. It doesn't even know what it is. So at that point, we need to make a judgment. Do we want to suspend the handsets so you can load them back in after the upgrade? That's a very good point if you're in regional support. So you've got a regional job, it's a long way from base, and the handsets are not there on site. You can do an upgrade and then dump them back in without even the customer being there for the service call. Right? So that's a tip for future servicing. But saving the transmitters is key for good housekeeping. So I'd highly recommend you get into a habit of saving the transmitter file, because that could be up to 500 handsets, especially at a common entry multi-access site. So you really got to get into the habit. And that also can be used later on for replacing units. So if the unit has end of life, you can replace the power head over and dump the original transmitter file back into it. Right? So there's a lot of uses for transmitter files. The save service data now, the second item, is what we're asking for good housekeeping, to grab the history of the opener. So that's going to give you 100 events and all the things like obstruction settings, how many times open, how many times closed, all the main setting items, and purely the history. So once those have been suspended, but we make the choice, or you make the choice whether you're going to do that, you can proceed, because as I said, it's going to wipe everything. And then there's a series of events where it says, are you sure you want to do this? It's going to wipe everything. Follow the bouncing ball through the firmware upgrade. And then after the event, you've got an option to restore the transmitter file. Okay, so dump it back into its memory. So that's firmware upgrade. That's the starting point. I've started talking about saving and restoring handsets. This is the bottom line with this area. It is a unique feature to be able to store the remotes, everything about those remotes. So the location in its memory of slot number 1 of 64, slot number 5 of 64, whatever that is, and it appears as a XLS, which is a spreadsheet, and it can be saved somewhere on your computer. are saved on the SD card as backups and can be managed over time. So you can delete, you can edit, you can save your changes, go back to site and restore back into that product, and you'll change the way that that handset file looks. So you can take people out, you can even add people in. The whole idea here is that you cannot do it while you're on site though. It's not so sophisticated that you need to be off site and then you need to go back to the site. It can't be done wirelessly. Beautiful system, and it's all connected. So it ties in, saving and restoring transmitters. This is probably the most service and installer based feature that we have in the programmer, and it really ties into the overall conversation this afternoon. This is a live graphing system available with the programmer. So we call it load monitoring, and what it provides is a complete real-time view, so live, of what the opener is doing in terms of its load and in terms of its force margin. We call that in the program a trip. That's at a point where it's going to auto reverse or stop. So these are going to be running live when you plug in and press the transmitter, and these things are going to be jumping. So they're going to be 10 bars in both lines, 10 bars. And all I'm saying to start knowledge of this is we've got above it 0 and 100, and it's talking about percentage of maximum. That's the workable possible load that this opener can do is scaled in 100%. So obviously you're not wanting it to be up where the 50 to 100% because the opener's working very, very hard. And therefore, especially on old doors, you can start a conversation with customers to say, you wouldn't change that door, and look at the poor opener. Right from word go, we're under strain. So you can report problems immediately and talk to them about life expectancy of openers. We can also have a lens of before and after, because it could be plugged in when you've got a fundamental service core issue, so loss of tension of door or major requirements of servicing. Plug it in, show Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is what I'm here for. Look at the screen, please. This product is working very hard, but I'm going to do my magic now. And then you do your work, whether it's Stilson's out, lubrication, whatever you need to do, and you're taking it back to where you need it to be. And you can prove, so you've got proof that you've actually fixed the opener. Okay, so that is a before and after lens. And then if you're an installer, you can actually check your own workmanship. So if you believe you've installed the door 100% and you believe you've installed the opener 100%, put it to the test, plug it in and operate the door and see where those load points are. And a tip to the wise, internally we can talk about this when we get into live training, but we've got a load register, which is the running load of the door, as I've talked about, and this is the force margin. They must not ever equal one another, otherwise the door will auto reverse. So the tip is 2 bars forward of the workable load is the recommended position for safety. So it's enough scope to allow for unnecessary or not allow for unnecessary service calls back for sensitivity, but also allow enough scope to not be forceful on its auto reverse impulse. So this is the key to success for an installer and service technician. It's actually opening up as curtains the full view of the site. So now there's no guesswork. If you plug this in, you'll know. To the point with granular control here, see this CNTS, you would think it's something else, but it's actually counts. It's counting constantly, right? Between open and close, there's sliced 1 millimeter increments between those 2 positions. And if you can identify your bouncing point where it's spiking load, that's a problem area, stop it. So press the remote and there will be a count here. And that will be from fully closed, that will be how many millimeters up from fully closed is where your problem is. So you can identify and triangulate the issues as well. Very powerful information available to the installers now. And the last piece is the saved service data. So the saved service data really is the history of the opener, and it can be ripped from the SD card once you've saved it, and it can be either emailed to us, we can review it and analyze if you've got some issues with products or even legal conditions with a client where they're saying, he said, she said, we can analyze it and give you a lens on what's actually been happening. It's also tying into the preventative maintenance program. So transmitter files and also the history of the opener is now building up information beyond just a service call sheet. You've got credibility, you've got some data about that site that you've never been able to access. So it's a continuous improvement program, but it's obviously a professional upskill area where you're now a technician once you land to the site. And now as we wind it back for the last part of this presentation, I've just identified two areas. One is, what does it mean really? What's in it for us as the consumer? And what is in it for you as the dealer, right? So consumer is very easy because we can talk about what their real desire is. They want peace of mind. So if we've got a technical product and we've got an increase in site capability, that's going to give them the peace of mind of who they're dealing with. So that's a really important piece. Deeper knowledge. We've now provided the skills that they know the difference and the correlation between the relationship between door and opener. That's very key to understanding door should have been serviced, door should have been replaced, opener should have been adjusted more regularly, so that we're developing a more robust conversation, and ultimately we're doing that scheduled servicing. So we're going to need to come back, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and then on a regular basis. Just remember, more points of contact in the garage door industry, makes money, but it's also tying into a very close relationship with your customers. We're also substantiating the labor. The labor is very important. Sometimes, most times, we're finding ourselves across the world in terms of garage door control that we charge a fee to come out and the consumer doesn't see the value in that time on site. We're giving them a professional lens on the time on site. So you've got more of a chance to pick up the clip off the job, whatever that clip is. That could be 150 Kiwi, could be 110 Kiwi, but it's giving you a bit more time and a very quality conversation with the customer too. And the last point is the competency. So if you've got something that's bringing to the table perception that the staff and the company they're dealing with are both technically competent and know their products intrinsically, once again, easier to extract the money for the service call. And then super categories of what we just covered off. What does it mean for you as the dealer? Cycle counts, specific granular control of how many times open and how many times closed is a quality conversation with any customer. So we can manage their expectations, call them out for misuse, meaning overuse of the door, and start talking early about replacement or end of life product if they're overusing it. Firmware updates, it's giving you a beautiful lens of upgrading, especially in after sales service, so you can make openers better in service work by just forcing firmware into them. Then we have firmware recovery. Talk about it in the last session. Nothing's ever lost in ATA. So that's the bottom line. Unless there's been a direct lightning strike on the circuit board, we can always recover firmware and reboot it. So inside, deep in the home files on the program, we have every firmware of every circuit board we've ever developed ever. So we can grab SDO7 1.12 earlier and grab that and bring it to the front, and then we are able to recover back to a firmware state again. So there's a number of things relating to that, but that's peace of mind for you that if it crashes, and it will only crash really in the event of the lead being unplugged halfway through a session of updating, or there's been loss of power while the process is going on. I'm not going to go on about it, but store and restore transmitters is the key to the backup success. I used to be a service technician. I've told the story very often that I left Merlin to come to ATA because I could not believe you could suspend transmitters in file and not have to go to a service call and ask for all the remotes to be on site before I came, just in the off chance that I would need to change a circuit board. With this system, you don't need to have them on site. You've got complete independent control to drop the handset file back in after you've done whatever works you'd need. And then you'll see through some conversations with the wider B&D group over time that it will start to validate your B&D warranty claims by the use of key features out of this programmer. So we've come to the back end. All I'm asking for now is a bit of understanding that we've been doing a bit of work for you to make it not just about a PowerPoint presentation, because talk is talk, but live, recorded, how-to videos really make sense. So what we've provided and will be providing very shortly is 5 videos to start with. The first ones are very easy to understand: how to get the firmware off the website, step 1, how to clean out the SD card of the programmer of the previous firmware and make it fresh so it can understand and take the firmware 55 or the new firmware, and how to unpack the zip file so it's all the good information gets in the SD card and that you can plug it straight into the programmer and make it work. Then we have what we've just been talking about. We have the how to suspend the transmitter files, how to suspend the history of the opener. We have how to update firmware, and that's also got within that one how to restore the transmitters. So it's an end-to-end story about quickly getting up to speed with the programmer, okay, in how-to videos. So I've actually completed the presentation now. I just encourage you all to take yourself off mute once again, and willing to interact on a wider scale now, because we're not just talking to content, and happy to answer any questions that may have arisen as a result of the information shown today.
Andrew, I've got a couple of questions there on the chat. You might want to have a look at.
Yep, okay.
Jerry and Joel.
Let's have a look. Has it been adjusted? That's from Jerry. The distance to the floor, so the ramp down time. I think that's part of the upgrade in 55 because it's interrelated to the force at the end of the cycle. Just capture that one if you could, Paul. Yep. I'll speak to Ray Hawkins about, or Tally, about the granular control of this. I mean, there's so many things that he may not mention, but definitely this is interrelated to the firmware. Can you save transmitters from a broken motor and dump them into a new motor? Yes, so long as there's no lightning strike or water damage. So you can power the unit up. Just so long as we can power it up, you can extract the transmitters and dump them into a new motor. The last one is when the openers come with the current firmware version, when do they? As soon as we can. I think Paul's going to talk to that a fair bit because he's got more live information on the ground in New Zealand than I have. So I think those are the 3. Hopefully I've answered 2 of them. Anything else, guys? Because we're here for you guys, to be honest. I love watching people just look, but interaction is always better.
Andrew, you mentioned cycle counts and servicing doors. Can the programmer program the motor so that it alerts the owner when a service is close to due or about? Yeah, so that's a really good point, Hemi. I keep on believing that I've covered everything, but there could have been another slide there, and that's one of those super features. So we have a service counter that's working in the background. And that is dwelling down. So it's counting down from 3,000 in every residential opener. So it's embedded in production at 3,000. But it's an opportunity for you with the programmer to manage expectations and drop that down. So it's going to come on as an alert at the end of each cycle with lamp flashes from the courtesy light. What you would be encouraged to do is, you know your site. If you believe it's going to be
an old door with a new motor that really is needing replacement or needing servicing, drop it down to 1,500, may even drop it down to 1,000, because you control when you want to go back there, because the customer is going to be told, when you see these lights flashing in sequence, you need to call us. Okay, so I would encourage you to definitely manage it down. I don't recommend managing it up, meaning going up beyond 3,000 or even higher, because that's the set and forget, I'm never going to go back to this opener again mentality, but we always want to go back. Okay.
Cool.
I hope that's answered that question.
Yeah, good one.
So I'll just quickly run through, or if has anyone got any more questions for Andrew at this stage?
Yeah, I do have one that I thought I'd bring up. I'm not sure if this is the right place to bring it up.
Yeah, go for it, Samantha.
So with our PG3s at the moment, I've run into a couple of issues where the GDO11V1s aren't supported devices. Like I'll plug the PG3 in to try and get a sort of reading as to what's going on with it and that sort of thing and how many cycles it's done, etc. But it will come up with this device is not supported, or it just won't do anything with it. It essentially doesn't even know that it's being plugged into something. Is that like going to be fixed in the version update, or is that a problem with the motor, or?
So device not supported is saying that there's something wrong with the chip. It's not reading it correctly. There's another prompt, Samantha, that would say that there's a communication breakdown, meaning the lead comms is faulty. So the short lead or the long lead to the programmer is not right, and that's com not achieved, I think it's called. So what you have there is, I believe, either a need to take a good lens now because we've got 55. Maybe there could have been a bug in that particular firmware. I don't know. But I would just encourage you get 55 and take a new look at that. If you've still got access to that opener, have you removed the opener, or is it still on site?
No, it's actually happened with a few different GDO11V1s, no other versions, but that one, we'll pull the motor out to send it back to B&D to see.
Yeah, V1. So that's first cab off the rank. Paul, could you just capture that? Maybe it's just a quick email to engineering to say at this time frame, because do you know what firmware version you're working with now? Is it 54?
Yeah, it's the latest one at the moment. I haven't run into any GDO11 V1s in probably about 6 months that I've plugged it in to have to send it back. Not sure if Craig's run into the issue on site, so I haven't run into it as yet, but I mean, I don't know when the next time, I get a GDO11 V1.
Would you have a service exchange? Would you have a service? Would you have a service of rejected GDO11 V1 in store?
Sorry, what was that? Would
you have a rejected GDO11 V1 somewhere in your store that you've just removed over the time?
I could probably have a look and see if, hang on, I've got it right here. Let me just have a look.
Because the sample test would be to just introduce firmware 55, which is the most current, and see whether it communicates.
Yeah, I do have a V1 here, so I could test it on that and see if it may have just been a bug over the different versions.
So you just grab 55 if you don't already have it, and force in a firmware upgrade in that one.
Okay, cool. No worries.
Great. Good. I like problems. Anything else, guys? Or Paul, do you want to jump into it?
I'll just quickly run through. I'll just share my screen.
Yep. You're able to, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, what are you guys seeing there? You guys seeing a web page?
Yeah.
We are.
So, this is a simple little form that we've put for everyone that might have a callback to a site where they've had to update the firmware. And this is what will give us a little bit of information to help us try and track down the problem, but also this is what will process your claim for us. So this has been sent out today by Matt Tegg, so it's available for you to save on your phone, a tablet, a laptop, or a PC, so you can do it out in the field, or back in the office. Simply put in your company name. Ideally, if we can capture your correct B&D account number, that's going to be really helpful for us when it comes in. Simply just check the name of the model that you're working on, the serial number. So the serial number is located on the back of the door. If you have, for example, 2 openers on site that you're having to deal with, we'd really like to be able to collect the serial numbers. The serial number collection is really trying to help us narrow down within a batch of motors where the issue might be arising. Just date that you've been to site, installation address, and then it will ask you a couple more questions. Mainly we're really keen to know if by upgrading the firmware, did it solve the issue that you got called back for? And then just submitting it, chuck in your email address and your name and hit submit, so that you'll know when you get this message that it's been submitted correctly. If you put your right email address in, you'll get a copy of that as well. And from there, we will bundle those up and put them as a credit against your account. So that's the sort of online technology that we'll be using going forward for a few more of our other warranty claims. Now, someone else asked, who was it? Michael was asking how long is it going to be before motors will come out of the factory. So currently we're upgrading the motors in the factory in China where they're made to version 55, but that will take about 2 to 3 months to roll out here by the time those motors arrive and we're sold through our current stock. We'll let you know as soon as you're being sent stock that has that updated. It will be identified on the outside of the box. But at the moment, we're really keen, and obviously it's a bit of a frustration for everybody, that they're updated throughout your businesses so that we can ensure that everyone's becoming more au fait with how PG3 works, and that we can guarantee that all stock that's being installed has that version 55 on it. All right. Any questions about that form that I've just shown you? Matt Tech is sending out a link today that will have that. It will also have some videos on, what have we got? Those first 2 videos you talked about, Andrew, which were downloading the firmware and also unpacking it and loading it onto the device. So he's created a link to our website with those, and those 2 videos should be available tonight. And we'll be adding more videos on the how-to over the next day, just while we're waiting for them to download from Andrew. And then we'll also put up some copies of these sessions, so that if you've got anyone in your team that wasn't able to attend that you feel might need to see this, that those are available for that as well. If you've got any issues around obtaining SD cards for your PG3s, because they take a maximum size of a 2 gigabyte, let us know, because we have secured some of those and we can send them up to you with version 55 or down or around to you wherever you're located, with that software on it as well.
You're a step ahead of us, Paul.
Yeah.
You're a step ahead of us. We don't have the JOT form. We're old school in Australia, so this is a really good initiative.
Yeah. We've also, if anyone's buying a PG3, we've made sure they've all been updated to version 55 as well, so it'll come to you ready with that software already on it.
So Paul, question.
Yep.
You're talking about the motors being updated in China, or the openers being updated in China, and you're asking us to update the ones that we have. Yep. Are you guys updating the ones that you've got in stock in Christchurch?
We will start updating some of them, but in the meantime, John, we've got so many that are already sitting out in the market and in transit that we need to make sure everyone, and it will probably be for the next month or two before we've got effectively nearly 10,000 motors sitting here before we can get them all updated. So one of the downsides to us running out of inventory late last year is we've committed to quite high levels of inventory in the business to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Okay, that's fine. What I'm asking though is, I'm like everybody else, I'll update the ones I've got, but I am asking, are you going to go through those ones you've got and update them and stamp them as updated so you send them out?
Not immediately, John, no. So this is part of making sure that the setup's right on site to ensure that we're getting the best performance out of those motors that we can. When you're doing it on site, it's a 2 to 3 minute job. And obviously, as Andrew's taken us all through, there's some other benefits to be had in the setup of those motors as well.
Would we? Oh, sorry.
No, that's right. You go.
I've got currently like 60 motors sitting in stock at the moment. Would it be a silly idea to upgrade them to at least version 55 whilst they're here in my stock before they go to site? Or
Absolutely,
okay.
Samantha. That would be the simplest and easiest thing for you guys to do. So that means there's no way that a motor gets to site that doesn't have that on it, or if someone forgets their PG3, or there's different businesses here. So some people have contractors, others have employees. So it just cuts out that point of error happening.
I did have a quick question I did want to ask. I don't know, again, if this is the right place to ask it, but I currently have a door that was installed in May, and it's sort of not really been in full operation, but it's been operated like once, maybe every 3 days. And they've only just run into an issue where I believe that the upgrade to it would work and it would keep the motor running. Is that does that sound correct, that it would only just fail?
Yeah. So the problem we've been having is intermittent.
Yeah.
So, it's not affecting every motor. It's not affecting every setup. Look, my best guess at the moment would be potentially 5%. You guys might have a better feel for that in the market of where you've been having some callbacks, things like doors popping up after a perfect setup and you've left the site. So we've had some feedback from a couple of businesses that have been trialling version 55 for us. We've solved some quite significant issues straight away. And we've also had some guys give us some feedback that have never used the PG3 before. We had a call this morning that they solved 2 doors in the last, within the last week, and they'd never used the PG3 before. And one of them was effectively, as he referred to it, dead. Up and upgrading that firmware, that's caused problems.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So, if you get stuck with that, Samantha, don't hesitate to give BDM a call to start with, or we can even put you in contact with Andrew with that other questions you've got around that GDO 11.
Yeah, no, that'll be cool. I'll keep an eye on it. Once I upgrade them, I'm just waiting for a adapter to be able to plug in the SD cards and that sort of thing. It should be coming tomorrow, but I'll try it with the GDO 11V1 that I've got here and see, and I can give some feedback on that.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just a bit of a reassurance for all on the line. My role encompasses Australia and New Zealand at the moment, but to get to the dealer training point, just be aware that I'm in direct line to engineering. So across all automation, meaning new product development, the nerve center, everything, as well as marketing. So what happens there is I can share some things that, you may not know during our course of conversations through these training programs. So it's just a bit of an understanding that I'm the direct conduit, and we're being very transparent. And I just hope that we see collectively as a group that this is a next wave forward to iron out some problems and also upskill teams across North and South Island in the B&D dealership, just about things that we don't share not very often. So this is a starting point.
Andrew, can we answer a question here?
Of course.
Yeah, Andrew, it's Ian here, Dominator South East Auckland. Hey,
Hello.
I noticed I've put in a secure the other day. We don't have a 24-volt feed.
No.
Because I needed to hook up another receiver for a gate. Is that the way it's going to be, or what's the story there?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that we've flagged, and one of them is 24-volt removal. So there's a couple of things that weren't brought forward from the previous development at the time. Unfortunately, they deemed it not necessary because the amount of people that were using that function. It's been highlighted as a need to discuss further. That was happening this week in engineering and management about this, the auxiliary mode. Ian, I don't know whether you know auxiliary mode. That didn't get brought forward. No solar. That was another one. No solar capability on these next gen. And that's about it, really. But yeah, these things are Definitely auxiliary mode would be possible because the tracks are already on the board, right? So we just need to populate that area and then bring it out to the terminal block and change the terminal block bank. So that's possible in the next version. What may not be possible is what you're asking for, because it's about capacity at the board level and the way in which the board's been developed, and the same with Merlin themselves. We've ironed out supply voltages to run accessories because it actually impacts the performance of the circuit board if you're running multiple things as well as your own equipment. So unfortunately for now, it's the additional plug pack to power up that receiver. So
Right.
that's always the solution. You know, your 12, 24 volt DC supply, minimum 300 milliamps to run the given receiver of ours, but it depends on what receiver you're dealing with from the gate company.
Yeah, obviously a lot of autos that we're replacing have got a receiver for an existing gate on them.
Yep.
And obviously our reps are very good, and they say, yeah, we'll rehook that up, no problems. But obviously that is a problem now. So I can see it being a real problem.
Yeah, so I'm a technician at heart, so this is what I cut my teeth at. So I know what you're talking about. Look, we don't really want to talk so deep about capability, but you know, you can always tap into a supply from the transformer if you're really needing to. So, yeah. But you start getting, are we bridging warranty conditions? It gets really quite messy. So at this stage, your out would be an additional plug pack to run that receiver, and then that's it. Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it answers it. I don't know if it's good.
Yeah, it's a matter of fact, right? So some things I can't change, but I can tell you definitely that there was a main meeting this week, Tuesday. So what's that? Yesterday, regarding all of the collection items about what happens next with the next version of this product, meaning what's the circuit board look like. Okay. There's also some feedback around the interface, meaning the buttons, the 4 buttons, and you know, the changes of force margin being the light intensity. That's been flagged as a buzzer on board, right? So you would have a buzzer to indicate, you know, 1 buzz default, and then incrementally higher up to 2 amps in buzzers. So that's a better way to, we believe, to convey for the installer, because those incremental change in the light intensity is sometimes very hard to pick for the installer when they're in the garage.
Yeah, so that's back to the old system really. But so can I take it from that we will get a feed in the next range, or?
I can tell you that I'll give you feedback. I don't know the answer because I'm not an influencer of that sort of side of the business, but Paul and I will be working within that management team to get it understood very quickly about what does that look like. And I think you'll find that will happen over the next course of month, but they'll frame up what that looks like and what's been approved and what's been, you know, we would like to do that. But the approved stuff is the changes we'll make immediately. Yeah, so Ian, the intention is to bring that back. It's one of those things that sounds a bit embarrassing, that disappeared without our knowledge. So yeah. You're not the first person to have brought that up. And it was one of those things that I would hand on heart say we were unaware of coming into the new range, because it wasn't expected to disappear. So the aim is to bring it back. And there's a couple of other small things like that as well. Yeah. But the same level of feedback. But Ian, I can tell you the same level of feedback plus higher, so amplified even more, is the removal of the auxiliary mode, because it's a true value of our brand only to run lights, run additional relays through that auxiliary, and also a cheap version of running or configuring the handsets to control other brands of doors on the same site.
Yeah.
So that's been even louder. So anyway, I appreciate the detail in it because we've already documented this through management. Yep.
Yeah, Craig here from Garrador, Auckland.
Hello, Craig.
G'day. Just a couple of things, just following on with Samantha's GDO 11 problems. I've found that there's a few GDO 9s that the program has just come up unable to connect a device. Obviously check all your cables, check connections, and you just can't get them to connect. Move on to the next job and you can plug the program in straight away, no worries. So I don't know.
To the COM. It'll get down to what's on the screen, Craig, and then I can at least tell you, fundamental problem with the chip, maybe a pin problem. The pins aren't connecting right for some unknown reason, and then the lead. Or that there's something like, we've got a branding situation in Australia with another company, and they have different firmware. So if you plug in a programmer into their equipment, it says unable to, or not compliant or something. So there's a number of different answers, but what I'll do, and once again, Paul, can you, I don't know how to frame that up. Yeah, so we just need to answer what happens at the screen of the programmer and give a definition of what's happening, whether it's a lead, whether it's a COM problem.
Yeah.
So maybe Craig and Samantha, if you have that again, if you take a photo of what you can see even and send it through to one of us.
Even straight to me, yeah. I'll take it straight back into engineering.
I've got several photos of previous ones that I've done. If those would help, or do you want ones from today forward?
No. That's a great starting point. Yep.
Yeah, cool. I can send those all through for you.
Fabulous.
So Sam, you're at WDSA.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. I'll send you Andrew's email address.
Oh, that'll be cool. Thank you.
Yep.
One other question I had too, that
yes, Craig.
When we download the service data and review that, the history count, it gives you event numbers.
Yes.
For what's going on with it. Is there any way that we can get what the codes are for all those event counters?
Now you're hitting the sweet spot. I've been asking for this for a while, and they're actually building it up in the background. So that was a hard request to Aaron, our I'd say you call him a prop head. He's down a dungeon, and he never comes out. But he's got all the deep codes. So he said he would have that fully completed for me end of next week. So I can start communicating that as well.
Yeah,
gives you a wider lens, because we're all trying to get the same thing. We want to be able to use that data to triangulate what's going on.
Yeah.
And some of them are key things that we don't even understand ourselves.
Yeah, and if we're looking for faults, then we're just flying blind on that one at the moment.
But I did call out, I think it was in the last session, maybe I didn't bring it up, this one. If you see stalls, if you see motor cutouts, and if you see direction problems are timing assembly problems, right? So it could be dust on the timing assembly, could be lead not connected right, but definitely cutouts and stalls, you're starting to lead to a DC motor problem. So if you see high numbers of stalls and high numbers of motor cutouts, that's something's not working right at the motor. Maybe there's too much carbon build up on the COM or the brushes. So that's something to triangulate, those two things.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no, that's good. That's good. Good to know.
Good to know.
Cool.
Very good. Really good session, Paul.
All right. Otherwise, if no one else has any other questions, we'll call it quits. We're getting a bit late. Thank you very much for everybody for taking the time to go through these. We'll be running more of these types of sessions that'll sort of talk us through more detail in different parts of doors and openers, because we realise that as a business we've been lacking some training, and as we get into more technical stuff we need more support as well. All right, but thanks for everything, and have a good evening.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Andrew.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Paul. Thanks, guys.